Welcome. I'm John Yacos of the law firm of John Yacos, and I have with me my attorney colleague from the firm, Shari Bornstein.
Hi, John.
Hi, Shari. So we're here to discuss and provide practical family law and divorce information in these difficult and uncertain times during the coronavirus. In terms of my background, I'm a New York City-based matrimonial and family lawyer with approximately 30 years of legal experience, and my law practice is exclusively focused on matrimonial law and family law. I'd like to introduce my colleague, Shari Bornstein. Shari, please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Hi, John. I'm a matrimonial and family law attorney with over 30 years of legal experience. I'm also a mediator and I practice collaborative law.
Now, the purpose of this recording is to provide an actionable, practical, and pointed discussion on how the current coronavirus pandemic impacts matrimonial and family law. And this presentation is primarily intended for those who live in New York State and generally and more specifically in New York City. Now, if after listening to this presentation, you have questions, please contact us and we can discuss your questions and concerns in more detail. It's probably best to contact us at our email address, and that's john@yacoslaw.com. That's JOHNYACOSLAW.com, or Shari@yacoslaw.com. And that's Shari spelled SHARI, and yacoslaw.com, or call us at 212-587-9560. Now, in consideration of the very difficult financial circumstances we're all facing, we're waiving our customary fee for any initial remote consultations for a limited period of time. So if you're interested, please contact our firm. It seems that everyone is asking questions regarding parenting and custody issues, so that's why we're addressing these issues first, and we intend to address other issues in subsequent presentations at some other time in the near future. It's important to know that this is being recorded March 30th, 2020, and the situation is fluid and dynamic. Therefore, depending upon when you're listening to this, the situation may have changed significantly. It's important to note that this is being provided for informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice and should not be relied on as legal advice. Also, if this presentation does not establish an attorney-client relationship. Now, in terms of this presentation, you should take away two very important concepts. First, we'll provide you a range of parenting and custody hypotheticals that we've encountered as it relates to parenting and related issues for consideration expressed in these hypotheticals. Second, we also provide a range of options and sequential plan of action to resolve the issues when they arrive. Now, with respect to the hypotheticals and their consideration, there are two general circumstances for consideration in any hypothetical. The first set of general circumstances is to consider whether, one, the parents have separated, or two, they're still living together. Now, in terms of the second general circumstance to consider, please note that, one, it's important to know if you have a written agreement or a court order, or two, if you don't have a written agreement or court order, and depending upon these answers to the questions, there's a slightly different analysis. Now, the first hypothetical that I'd like to discuss with Shari is that the parties have two children and have recently separated and do not have any formal agreement or court order. And they have some shared parenting time, including overnights in each household. Now, Shari, what do you see as the most significant parenting issues if the parents have separated under this hypothetical? And then they must negotiate various difficult parenting issues during the coronavirus pandemic.
So here are some issues that parents have been experiencing. One is the exchange issue. And the questions to ask are, where do the parents live? Are they in close proximity to each other, or do they live a distance away? New York City residents are encountering travel issues because most rely on public transportation, which is now avoided by most residents. Some folks have a car and they can use their own vehicle to transport their children between homes. So if parents live close to each other, they should go ahead and make the exchange as seamless as possible. Things to consider, though, are who would be the parent that travels with the child, and where will those parents meet to exchange the child? Will they meet in a parent's lobby or another meeting spot? Other things to consider are the relative health, of all the parties involved and the risk for a parent or child to travel. Parents very well may have concerns about the other parent. Concerns include the other parent's exposure to the virus or to another person in the parent's home, perhaps a significant other, or whether a parent is exposed potentially during a course of employment. For example, a parent or a significant other may be a first responder or essential worker, or it may be unknown if they're exposed. There may be a blended family situation, so there may be a consideration of exposure to the other parent due to a relationship with another person who may have a teenager who goes back and forth in between the homes. Some parents express just a general fear of the virus, and we have to look at whether those concerns are reasonable. So what can parents do when they have these concerns? First thing is they really need to be honest about potential exposure. Then they can think about other options for contact, such as telephone or video contact, with an emphasis on the temporary nature of such contact. We all want this to be over as soon as possible. The other thing that they can do is try to create joint rules for their children in both homes that reflect both parents' concerns regarding contracting the virus, or things like how much time can children stay outside? What will the child's daily schedule be? How much comfort food or junk food is a child allowed to have in each home? And what's the amount of screen time that a child can have that doesn't include education purposes? Some positive things that parents can do is put in place video contact with the other parent so that the child and the parent can do a fun activity, maybe cooking together. We encourage parents to be generous with makeup time for the other parent if the other parent has been unable to exercise parenting time. If there's any disagreement between the parents, we suggest relying on a third party, like a pediatrician, to resolve conflict. Sometimes because of conflict between parents, parents won't hear each other, but they might be willing to follow the advice of a neutral third person.
That's great advice, Shari. Thank you very much. I would like to add that, as many of you probably know, custody in terms of any court appearance or court engagement is based on the child's best interest under the totality of the circumstances. And recently, I would say the most important factor in determining the best interest is, does a parent promote the relationship between the child or children and the other parent? Now, we recently received an article from Justice Jeffrey Sunshine, who is the statewide coordinating judge for matrimonial cases in New York State, and happens to be the presiding justice in the matrimonial part in Kings County. He provided this on Friday in a New York Law Journal article, and it's highly important that everyone knows the takeaway in what he said. And I'll just quote from this article, which we will provide to individuals. And the most important takeaway, I think, is those who think that there is a lack of consequence to not conducting themselves appropriately during this crisis are wrong. So what he's telling everyone is, even though access to court might be limited, please be aware and be mindful that your actions will be evaluated when and if you have to go to court after this. And he also told us at the end, which I thought was important, if parents are not listening to you and think they are not accountable for their conduct, might I suggest you send this to them. So that's why we want to provide it to everyone, that his words should be taken very seriously. And I know that other judges in the state court system are going to be mindful of Justice Sunshine's words. So we should all be as well. Now, I'd like to address a variation on the first hypothetical with respect to the second hypothetical. The second hypothetical is one or both parents are involved with another person, and for the sake of this hypothetical, the other parent does not live with this other person, but they typically spend a great deal of time together, including sleeping over at their respective homes. Now, Shari, what do you advise with respect to this hypothetical?
So this situation really merits an honest, non-confrontational discussion with all of the adults involved. It is reasonable to ask questions about where the adults have been and with whom they've had contact. Are all of the adults exercising physical distancing? What contact have the parents had, the adults had with others? What if someone has a compromised immune system? How will that issue be resolved? You want answers to make the best decisions for your children, so try to avoid accusing the other parent or the other parent's significant other of doing anything wrong. The goal is really to ensure that everyone stays healthy. Another possibility might be to commit to a period of quarantine long enough to feel reasonably comfortable that there is no issue of the virus in anybody's home.
That's great information. Again, I can't emphasize strongly enough the need to be reasonable and practical and try to creatively come up with solutions to some of these problems. Now, the third hypothetical is the parents have separated, the child's not feeling well, and one parent doesn't want to allow the other parent parenting time to go forward. Shari, what do you say with respect to that hypothetical?
So typically there's a lot of discretion and reasonableness, as you mentioned, that needs to be exercised. So if there's an issue, the parents should consult with the child's pediatrician. Look to a doctor to support to help understand the severity of the illness and whether it warrants no access between parents. Also, parents need to consider if they have an agreement or court order. If there is an agreement or court order, it very well could be a violation if the parent denies the other parent parenting time as described in the agreement. I happen to be involved in a case in which a father refused to return the party's child to the mother who lived in New York City. And a New Jersey judge ordered the father to do so and specifically said that COVID-19 is not an excuse to unilaterally deviate from the parenting time established in the parties' agreement.
And I think that's why it's important to understand that if you do have an agreement or a stipulation or court order, that you really have to abide by that as the primary obligation. And then in those circumstances, understand that, again, reasonableness will and practicality will also be a factor. Now, here's a real tough one with respect to the fourth hypothetical. Shari, what if the parents are living together and they're headed towards separation or divorce, but again, along comes the coronavirus pandemic and they're still living together? What do you advise those individuals when they're basically stuck together while they were, as Governor Cuomo says, taking a pause?
Right. These are challenging times, and it is tough in most New York City homes. But I recommend that parents have a calm discussion with each other after the children have gone to bed, or maybe they can step outside, maybe take a walk. Apartments are overcrowded with kids home from school all day, college students having returned back, parents are working from home together, and it is important to acknowledge that that is a difficult dynamic to live with day to day. One thing that parents can do as well is assign parenting responsibilities to an on-duty parent so that the other parent can take time to work or take some time for self-care and switch off. The other thing might be to assign activities to one parent who has a talent in certain areas, whether it's a schoolwork subject or a hobby. If parents can safely discuss these issues in any of the above circumstances that we've outlined, keep in mind that parents are role modeling for their children all the time. Children are watching everything that their parents do, and especially now, they're doing so in very close quarters. Show your children that you can resolve problems with the other most important person in their lives. Children will benefit from parents' good work. To avoid misunderstandings and miscommunication under all of the circumstances, memorialize any agreements that you reach in writing, perhaps via email, or even as a family contract that might include children.
That's great. Now, the preceding hypotheticals were general in nature, and we tried to cover some of the more common hypotheticals that we've encountered. But as you know, the permutations of any hypothetical in anyone's real life can be endless. So I hope that was helpful. And that was the first major section of our presentation. The second one, as we indicated, are going to be the options and a specific plan of action. Now, your plan of action should go through the following sequence of options, right? First, you should contact the other party and specifically state the problem as you understand it in clear and specific I statements. Now, you may not understand what I statements are in totality, but I would suggest that if you want further information with respect to what an I statement is, listen to the webinar presented by FamilyKind. And you can reach that on their website, which is familykind.org. And that will really help you understand what it means, because they presented a great webinar on their website recently. Now, then if that doesn't work, state your position to the other person and refer to any agreement or order that's relevant to the problem. Now, if you don't have an agreement, you still should state what the position is with respect to what's going on after you articulate the problem, the underlying problem. You should then state your solution to the problem, and then ask for the other person's opinion and their response, so you get some indication of what their position is, so at least you know one way or the other what's going on. And be open-minded when it comes to solutions. It's not binary. It's not your position or their position. You could come up with a lot of different well-respected, between the two of you, well-respected solutions to these problems. Now, if you can't resolve the problem between you two, then what I would suggest is seek assistance to help resolve it. Now, assistance can come in many different forms, one of which could be an objective third party, such as a pediatrician, if it's a medical issue. You could, as Shari indicated, engage a mediator or collaborative lawyer to assist you. That might be very beneficial. Also, you could retain an attorney for limited purposes, such as sending the other party notification of a problem and putting it on record that there is a problem. And that's what we call a lawyer's letter, that I've been retained, I'm assisting you in resolving these problems. Please contact us or have your lawyer contact us. Last, you could go to court. Again, at this moment, there's very limited ability to go to court. It's usually should be conceptualized by any person as if there is an emergency or it's essential. So that's, at this point, what's going on in court. Now, Shari, explain a little bit about some of the alternatives to court that are available to the parties.
Sure. So first, parties need to determine whether or not there really is an emergency or an essential matter as defined by the current court protocol. If the matter is not an emergency and is not headed to court, parties can think about mediation. A mediator is a neutral third party who can facilitate a discussion. There is so much that's out of control now, and if parties can reach an agreement even on one issue, it can bring some calm and comfort, even if all of the issues of their case can't be resolved right now. The other thing that parties can do is participate in a collaborative process. In a collaborative process, parties are represented by attorneys who have committed to resolving all issues outside of court. The process will likely involve a family specialist who's a mental health professional experienced in child development and conflict resolution. That person can help assist with child-related issues. The lawyers then can draft an agreement which is temporary for everybody to sign. Our office has quickly pivoted to remote appointments to meet current needs of clients during these unprecedented times. So we remain available to be able to facilitate any discussion that needs to happen.
And that includes the availability of court. And it raises a lot of questions with respect to, can I go to court? When can I go to court? What are they doing in court? And it is an ongoing, fluid, and dynamic process. And the takeaway, briefly, because it is somewhat complicated, is that only essential business will be conducted. Now, as of Thursday, the 26th, March 26, 2020, family court system in New York City will be conducting appearances by video conference, telephone, or electronic filing. And that's still being fleshed out. So it'd be best to talk to any lawyer about what exactly is going on at the moment if you need it. Also, there are certain emergency proceedings which clearly will be necessary for the court to deal with, such as domestic violence issues, child protective proceedings, and it varies between what has been stated is available with respect to family court and Supreme Court. And there are questions with respect to the availability at this point, but as I stated, the takeaway really is that things are dynamic, and contact an attorney if you feel you've resolved or attempted all the options and have not been able to resolve the issues. Shari, you recently contacted the court to see what the court's availability is. Can you tell everyone what happened with that?
I did. I called the court's the coronavirus hotline, and the hotline responders are doing their best, but they don't have all the information. I then called the Kings County Family Court to ask about filing for an order of protection, and I received a recording which provided some information about essential matters and referenced another phone number. So I called that number and nobody picked up. I could also not leave a voicemail, and we just don't know what the court staff's tasks are and who's available to pick up the phone. So I didn't get very far.
So I assume it's, they're going to be extremely overburdened.
Right.
It's going to be very difficult. Again, keep that in mind if you ever try to, access the court at this moment. Now, with respect to final comments, I'd like to say, we are in uncharted waters. These are unprecedented circumstances and without really good answers. I mean, we're trying to provide you our expertise and experience with respect to giving you what I think the court would anticipate. And I know that the court system is trying very hard to address this on a daily basis, and it may be changing. And I think my feeling is that within the next month or so, things are going to loosen up and be more clear in terms of how to facilitate the virtual court system. I would say also expect delays once the court is opened up. I always tell my clients any process with respect to the court is more a marathon than a sprint. And I think it's even more so now because not only do you have these cases within this time period, but you have the backlog of adjourned cases. During this time period, there's much more discretion between any party because of this uncertain nature and the fact that court is of limited availability now. And there's a greater likelihood for dispute, and we're trying to work through the process and help people work through the process. Be concrete and as specific as possible. So document everything, because really what's going to happen is later on, you're going to be looking for what the other person said, what you said, and the court's going to be looking at that. Now, Shari, do you have any final comments?
Yes, I'll leave folks with this. Parents should be creative and open-minded when it comes to solving problems that relate to their children, and I encourage people to do that.
I think that's great advice. Well, thank you very much for listening and watching. We hope this was helpful. And again, feel free to contact us with any questions at our email address, john@yacoslaw.com or sherry@yacoslaw.com or at 212-587-9560. And finally, please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.
Stay healthy. Bye.